Tonight, we report from the Caribbean island that wants to cut legal ties with Britain so it can hang murderers.
If you have the death penalty and you don't carry it out, there'd be disrespect for the law.
All these people in jail can't be guilty.
If you find all the evidence to prove that that's the person that did it, no bottom line, hang them.
World in Action investigates why Trinidad wants to hang 85 killers and why 5 British judges are standing in the way. Trinidad, a tropical island republic in the Caribbean. But the authorities say it's becoming one of the most dangerous places in the world because of drugs and violence. Domestic fights are an everyday feature of the capital's crime. Here, police are called to an address where an argument is getting out of hand.
They're not the first man that tried to put in jail. You come around me them kind of thing, you know. Don't stand down here, no nothing. You don't feel like afraid, you know. You don't feel like afraid, you know. I'm telling you, you know. You don't feel like afraid, you know.
That ain't making sense, man. Forget that.
He's stupid bad. Don't feel like afraid. I stupid bad. Don't feel like afraid, you know.
I want my chain.
The ball when the police come out, talk and chop.
Thank you.
Last time you try to set up the man, our next man is with the gun.
Thank you.
Chop, girl, is a chop. And watch, I will conduct all that chop from you. Don't feel like afraid. I'm not afraid. Because it's not the first time. It's not the first time police come around me for nothing.
Are you worried that he mentioned a gun?
No, I'm not worried, but a note was made. A note was made, his address was taken, you know. So, but regard everything as serious.
On this small island, a volatile domestic situation could quickly escalate into violence and murder. Trinidad's rising crime rate was an important factor in the election of the current government.
There are more than 100 murders per year. There are many crimes of violence in Trinidad and Tobago. We believe that most of them are drug-related, about 70% of the crimes in Trinidad.
The Prime Minister appointed this man his Attorney General. Ramesh Maharaj pledged to get tough on crime, and that meant using the death penalty.
The statistics in Trinidad and Tobago show that whenever it was carried out, it acted as a deterrent. At the present time in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Caribbean, people are saying, well, they can kill and they can spend their time in prison, and that having regard to all that is happening, they can live better in the prison than if they remain outside.
The government sees a link between murder and drugs, so it's put resources into drug busting. An important role's been given to the Coast Guard patrols with high-speed interceptors.
These patrols basically have two purposes. One is to show the flag of Trinidad and Tobago, and the other one is to try to cut down on the illegal narcotics and contraband coming into the country.
Just 7 miles separate the island from the coast of South America, and the patrols try to detect any cocaine traffickers coming from Venezuela.
A lot of goods leave the South American mainland. They come to Trinidad for transshipment off to Europe, to the United States, and to the islands further up the chain. So you find Trinidad is located in the center of that transshipment loop. The captain of this vessel just indicated a vessel that appeared to be running from the general direction of Venezuela. However, when he sighted us, he changed his direction and started heading towards that island out there called Gaspar Grande. So it's enough to awaken suspicions.
Up to 2,000 kilos of cocaine pass through this channel each month. So the high-speed interceptor is sent in fast pursuit. The interceptor's crew board the suspicious boat and carry out a thorough search to see if there are any drugs on board. But nothing is found, and the Coast Guard resumes its routine patrol. Trinidad's authorities have had considerable assistance from Britain and the United States, but still regard drugs as a major problem.
We've noticed that the drug trafficking has become more and more high-tech. They've got larger vessels, faster vessels. A lot of the vessels are equipped with radar. There's a possibility there may even be radar jamming equipment on them. Arms and ammunition are readily available over in Venezuela. So the fight has increased. It's not to say we're losing, but it's getting harder and harder to make a dent.
Until 1962, Trinidad was a part of the British Empire. As elsewhere in the Caribbean, the new republic system of law and order kept its British foundations. But while we ditched the death penalty, they kept it. Under current Trinidad law, the penalty for murder, any murder, is death by hanging. This is Trinidad's main prison in the heart of the capital. Behind these walls is death row. It's getting crowded. There are currently 85 people sentenced to death for murder. No one's been hanged for 4 years, but this month that could change. The government wants to hang murderers, and the public supports them. Public opinion polls have consistently shown support for the death penalty. We put this to the test at one of Trinidad's most exclusive country clubs.
If you do the crime, you got to do the time. In this case, it's, you know, you have to be hanged.
Otherwise, they stay in the prison, and when they come out, they make more trouble, or they just... I think if they are judged that they should hang, why not hang them?
They should hang, but at least they should have some kind of difference between brutal murder and self-defense.
In one of the poorer districts of the capital, we found enthusiasm for the death penalty was even stronger.
Do you think people who've been convicted of murder should hang?
Very soon. As soon as they are convicted, and stop wasting taxpayers' money.
If you find all the evidence to prove that that's the person that did it, no bottom line, hang them.
I feel something should be done. It wouldn't deter them, but you have to think twice before you commit the murders.
If Trinidad uses the death penalty, Barbara Thomas's son will probably be the first to be executed. Barbara lives with her family in the very south of Trinidad. Every week for the past 3 years, she's made the 6-hour round trip to the capital to see her son on death row. Inside the British-built prison, she waits for hours before seeing him for just 15 minutes. But it's a journey she may not have to make for much longer. Darren Thomas had never been in trouble with the police before, but in March 1993, at the age of 24, he was arrested for murder.
He said, "Mommy, don't believe anything that they are saying." He said, "This is not true. I did not do this." So I told him, I said, "Well, then tell them where you were and what happened." And then I asked him if I could pray with him for a short while, and I just said maybe about 3 or 4 lines of prayer with him. I asked God to be with him.
The murder with which Thomas was charged happened during Carnival, when the whole island takes to the streets for dancing and drinking until the early hours. It was a busy time for taxi drivers. In Prince's Town, a young taxi driver called Chandranath Maharaj picked up 2 passengers from the rank. They were a young couple who wanted to leave the partying to go swimming in the ocean. He took them 15 miles along the coast to Mosquito Creek. But at this lonely spot, the couple held a knife to his throat and robbed him of his money. He escaped from them and ran into the sea.
When he thought they had gone, he swam back to shore and was hiding behind one of those boats there. This abandoned boat. And they waited for him, and then they hold him and cut his throat and stabbed him because he fought them. He had about 29 stabs.
Chandranath's death was first reported as a drug-related murder. But a month later, police arrested Darren Thomas for this murder and the killing of 2 other taxi drivers. The motive was robbery. He was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. His 17-year-old girlfriend was also found guilty.
I think they should pay the full penalty for the murder they committed, because it's a planned murder. You see, they walk with knives and plan the murder. You understand? They rob and kill. This is what is going on, you see.
They call him a serial killer. I have newspaper clippings in there with him front page. That was so cruel.
You don't believe that he's a
I don't believe that Darren has killed anyone. I believe that Darren is innocent, because I asked him on more than one occasion. I asked him, Darren, did you do this? And he told me no.
So far, Darren Thomas has escaped hanging by launching a series of appeals in Trinidad and abroad. Appeals based on whatever holes in the legal system defence lawyers can find.
Most people who are arrested don't see a lawyer for many, many months. There's virtually no legal aid for criminal proceedings in murder. About £150 is all that's made available. Reading through hundreds of transcripts of trials, it's quite clear that witnesses are barely, if ever, called for the defence, and a defendant says usually 1 or 2 sentences only to the jury in his own defence. And so really the minimum standards of a fair trial are not there, and therefore it's wrong to assume that the conviction is safe in all of these cases.
The state says its convictions are safe. In 3 years, Thomas's case has been to the High Court, the Court of Appeal, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and finally it's arrived here, at Trinidad's highest court of appeal, located not in Trinidad, but 4,000 miles away in London. Just yards away from the Prime Minister's office is the home of the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. Although on British soil, it acts as a foreign court. When Trinidad kept the death penalty, it also kept an appeal system which resulted in 5 law lords having the final say. In an increasing number of murder cases, these judges stand between a person and the gallows. But a recent ruling by the judges on the death penalty has frustrated Caribbean governments. It said people held on death row longer than 5 years couldn't be executed. To do so would be cruel treatment. This deadline meant that overnight, hundreds of convicted killers in the Caribbean avoided the gallows.
Murderers have been using that as a means of escaping the gallows by filing constitutional motions and prolonging their stay in prison. They know that if they cross the 5-year threshold, they will escape being hanged.
Derek Alley is one of the Trinidad defence lawyers who've taken advantage of the appeal system to keep Darren Thomas from the gallows so far.
Aren't these applications and petitions to various bodies abroad just delaying tactics which keep him alive?
Not particularly. It is if a government enters into an agreement which affords citizens particular rights, it is open to the citizen to avail himself of those agreements. He would never have done it if it was not available. It is made available to him, so he's done it. It is not he has no control over time. He's in jail.
In June, the government lost patience with Darren Thomas. It read the death warrant to him before one of his appeals had been completed. He came within 24 hours of execution before his lawyers won leave to appeal one more time. Darren Thomas's case now presents the Privy Council judges with a major challenge. They must decide whether Trinidad can go ahead and hang him while he is still appealing to international human rights bodies. Their judgment could mean life or death for the other 84 killers on death row.
There are a number of things that may well happen. in Trinidad after this case is determined. And I think we as a panel have clearly understood exactly what the implications will be for us in logistical terms down in Trinidad.
On the eve of the Privy Council case, Darren Thomas's lawyers hold a council of war in London. If you were to hire the legal expertise around this table, you would pay thousands of pounds per hour. But when it comes to Privy Council cases, some of London's top barristers and solicitors give their services to death row prisoners for free.
Without us, they would not have access to justice, and I think every lawyer believes in the right of access to justice.
But tactics like these are making Caribbean governments question whether they should be attached to the Privy Council at all.
I will tell you, it's not looking good for Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean at this stage, because so far it seems as though the criminal elements have had the use of some of these procedures to frustrate states in carrying out the death penalty.
Trinidad's army is an important weapon in the state's fight against the drug barons. This morning they're planning an airborne mission to find illegal plantations of marijuana.
First of all, we fix the fields, that is, we locate them, and from there we set up camp and so forth and look to destroy the fields. Trinidad is like, let's not say a melting pot, but it's like a gateway to Europe and to Latin America, Central America and so forth. So it is used here and also sent to different Caribbean countries and locals.
Through missions like these, the government destroyed more than 3 million marijuana plants last year. From the air, it was hard to see the illegal dope farms, but it wasn't long before the officers spotted suspicious clearings in the vegetation.
If you look at the blue hut, there's a very small plantation you're looking at right now.
As we flew further into the jungle, the regular pattern of the plants was a clear indication of the illegal marijuana fields.
The plastic that you just passed on your left is the plastic that they hang the marijuana fields. The leaves itself to dry. When they finish, plant it and cultivate it. What we'll do when we get this information back to headquarters, we'll organize for our people to come here to eradicate this problem.
The state has had some success in its war against drugs. 9 members of a notorious drugs gang were convicted of shooting a family to death. They were all sentenced to hang. But according to those representing people on death row, the link between drugs and murder has been overestimated.
The drug bogey in modern society has replaced the communist bogey. Something goes wrong, you point to the drug lord. A murder happens, it's easy for a police can't solve a murder to say it's a drug-related shooting. So, you know, and it makes a good politics as well.
In fact, the majority of the cases on death row are not drugs-related, and many of them involve domestic violence, including the second vital test case, which the Privy Council is now reviewing. Down this road, in a remote part of Trinidad, is the scene of a brutal murder. A villager chopped down the encroaching jungle to show us the ruins of what had once been the home of Pamela Ranjatan and her husband. Pamela had a relationship with someone else, and the state says she invited her lover and this man, a friend called Hanif Hilaire, to kill her husband.
She planned with them that she will leave the back door open one night. She left the back door open that night in February 1991, and both men came in to the house.
They were carrying sticks. In the back room, Pamela's 11-year-old daughter woke up.
I saw 2 fellas walk into the house and went straight into my father's room. Then I heard approximately about 3 to 4 lashes. When I went into the room, I saw my father's head was smashed in. And the 2 guys came back in, they wrapped Daddy in the sheet, opened the front door, put him in the trailer van and went off with him.
They came back and they knocked on the door And Pamela, she opened it, and they said that the job was done, meaning that they had killed him, they had murdered him, and burnt his body in the vehicle. And she took them to this area, the living room, and the three of them sat around the living room, and she made tea for them, and they all drank tea.
Pamela, her lover and Hanif Hilaire were held in custody for 4 years before trial, 4 years in which none of them saw a lawyer. All were convicted of murder and sentenced to hang. Hanif Hilaire appealed to the Inter-American Commission, but as with Darren Thomas, the government read the death warrant to him before the Commission had ruled. The Privy Council must now decide whether the state was right to do so. Candice Jordan's testimony helped convict her mother, but 6 years on, she's helping her mother appeal by revealing the years of violent abuse inflicted by her father.
I feel it's time to speak out, let everybody know the truth instead of everybody blaming her for it. He have a part to blame for it. After I got to realize it wasn't her fault, he is party to blame for it, because if he didn't used to abuse her, that would have never happened.
A photograph of her. We don't think there are any photographs at the moment in existence.
This London-based solicitor is in Trinidad to help Pamela Ranjitan's appeals to international courts. Those appeals will be based on the fact that she was a battered wife.
Aren't you just interfering in another country's justice? Aren't you just imposing a different culture here?
Well, not at all. They have chosen to retain the Privy Council. The moment that they choose to have their own court, then we won't be interfering at all in any shape or form. In fact, I don't view it as interference. I think that we're actually collaborating together, working together very successfully on these cases with local lawyers.
But the future of these sorts of appeals is in doubt. Trinidad and other Caribbean states are so frustrated at not being able to carry out their own punishments that they're even considering pulling out of the Privy Council itself.
We must carry out the law. I think a government, an executive, has a duty, primary duty, to carry out the laws of the country. As a matter of fact, when I became Prime Minister, that's one of the oaths I took. I swore to carry out the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. It's part of our law. And unless that changes, we must do all we can to effect the law.
But is this also because you see the Privy Council as an anti-hanging court?
Not because we see them as an anti-hanging court, though I think they are, but it's because they are putting obstacles in the way to implementation of the law, which is the government's duty.
World in Action first looked at the role of the Privy Council in Caribbean murder cases back in 1977. We featured a convicted killer who wanted the Privy Council to quash his conviction. His lawyer was at the time trying to keep him from the gallows. The lawyer's name was Ramesh Maharaj.
And the Privy Council must assert its role. Here it is a man who by their very decision could go to the gallows. He could be an innocent man.
Today, that lawyer is Trinidad's Attorney General.
When did you change your mind about hanging?
I'll prefer to answer that question in that when I was in opposition and before I became in government, I advocated that the death penalty should be abolished. The position I have adopted is that when one becomes a public official, as a government minister, one takes an oath to uphold the Constitution and the law. My job is as a lawyer doing a job.
The Law Lord's decision is expected in the next few weeks. Whatever the outcome for Darren Thomas and Hanif Hilaire, the prospects for people who believe they've been unfairly sentenced look bleak.
Mistakes can be made in all legal systems. This isn't peculiar to Trinidad. All legal systems make mistakes, and when someone has to pay the ultimate price for those mistakes, one should go very slowly before withdrawing any rights of appeal.